Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, coming to you this morning, talking to you about cooperatives. Everything Cooperative is the name of the show. You know, on this great Thursday morning, we have a lot to be thankful for. But what we want to talk to you about this morning, given that this is Women's History Month, that we have a lady with us in the show, in the program this morning, Ajowa Ifateyo, who's going to talk to you about cooperatives. And this morning, the main subject is going to talk about how we can work together as Americans, how we can work together as Black Americans to better each other. Good morning, Ajowa.
Good morning, Vernon. How are you?
I'm great. I had a little brain freeze on your name this morning. I knew that was going to happen.
Often it happens.
And Ajowa means the...
Girl born on Monday.
Girl born on Monday. And Ifateyo?
Love brings happiness, a Swahili word.
Love brings happiness.
Yes.
Okay, love for each other can really bring a lot of happiness.
Absolutely.
Okay. A girl born on
Monday.
On Monday, who has love brings happiness. So how did you get involved in this co-op business?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I have been an activist most of my life, even starting from high school. And I went to Southern New Hampshire University after being involved, and I've kind of realized that we needed institutions, and just demonstrations were not going to make a difference in the lives of Black people. And so I learned about co-ops at the Southern New Hampshire University. So my teacher, Chris Clamp, had mentioned to me about Jessica Gordon Nemhart, which was a Black woman who had studied co-ops. And so turns out that Jessica lived 10 blocks from me in D.C. And so she invited me to the first conference of the Eastern Conference of Workplace Democracy. So I went there, and I learned about co-ops from there. And at the same time, my friends Linda Leaks and Patricia Kent were organizing a Black housing cooperative. And so as it turned out, I went to that Eastern Conference on one day, and then I went for the groundbreaking for the L.J.O. Baker Intentional Community Cooperative. And from that conference, I was so excited about the idea of poor people, or any people actually, because co-ops can appeal to doctors, lawyers, cab drivers, unskilled laborers, any and everybody. But the idea that an average person could go into business with someone else and make a difference in their own lives really appealed to me. And so, you know, a couple of friends and I, Kenji Torre was one of them, Shepsar, we got together, we met for a year to try to set up our own cooperative. But as it turned out, money was the thing. And money generally kills most dreams. They down the line because of lack of money.
Well, you know, you mentioned a lot right here in this opening, and Jessica Gordon Nemhart has been on the program.
Yes.
And she's fascinating. Her book, Collective Carriage.
Right.
Collective is what we're talking about today, how we can work together. But one of the things that came out of that book, she said, well, a couple of things came out of that book. One was that this is a hidden history. This history has a lot of breadth and depth to it of Blacks' involvement in co-ops throughout our history here in the U.S. So, you know, Blacks have, well, not only in the U.S., but in Africa, working cooperatively. And the other one was there has been a lot of Black women in the cooperative movement.
Yes.
It looks like from her book, I would say a lot, if not most of the advancements in cooperative involvement has been with Black women.
Yes. One of my favorite is Nanny Helen Burroughs, who we have a street named after here in D.C., and a lot of us don't know that history, but she started a school. She started a factory, a broom factory, and was getting orders from around the country, Baltimore, people coming to buy her brooms as a way of supporting each other. And then she had a farm in Maryland, and she brought produce back to D.C. to sell. And so, my idea, I would just love for us to do a Nannie Helen Burroughs Society where we study everything about her and really understand who she was. And so, it's been our way of survival in this country. Du Bois talked about co-ops and how we needed to organize them way back. Garvey, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Jo Baker, they were all co-op advocates. And the hidden history is that we would not have survived without cooperatives in this country. And it's so ironic that today we kind of think of co-ops as a white hippie thing when it was a black survival thing from the get-go. And we've forgotten that history, and we kind of, poo-poo co-ops. Some people think it's impossible for us to get together and work together and do business together.
Well, I had a great conversation with my 10-year-old granddaughter on Monday, and she had been taught in school that about George Washington, and she said that George Washington was married and had 2 kids. And I said, well, did he have any slaves? She said, no. And I said, no. I said, why not? She said, well, they didn't teach us that. And I said, well, do you really know if he did or didn't just because they didn't teach you? And we Googled it, and it found out that he had slaves as early as 11 years old. When his father died, he inherited 10 or 12 slaves. I don't remember the number. And when he died, he had 365 or something. So she said, well, why do they call it history if they don't give you all the facts? We had a great conversation. And I broke down his story. And so it depends on who's writing the history. And so when Jessica Gordon Nimhard said that this is a lost history, it's a loss. We don't have this story about blacks and co-ops and blacks working collectively, bringing it from Western Africa and Southern Africa, this whole feeling of co-ops, and maybe all of Africa, I don't know, but from the people I've had on this program, I've gotten a story of our history. And we're very much collective, very much working together. And I did tell my granddaughter that you've got to do your own research.
Absolutely. And it's the same applying to us today.
Yes.
There's all kinds of history we have no clue about. And so we have to refine that history and help it to inform our work today.
Well, that's what Jessica's done, which is great. And I got onto this. Another guy, it's a white guy, British guy, is writing another book on the influence of cooperatives on the civil rights movement.
Yes.
Okay, and so I've had him on. David Thompson is his name. I've had him on twice. I knew about him before I knew about Jessica. Mm-hmm. And so he's been on, and he's really, when you talk about Marcus Garvey, Frederick Douglass, mm-hmm. W.E.B. Du Bois, so many different people. And I've also been told, and I've been trying to get a songwriter on the program, Belafonte.
Oh, was he involved
actor.
in co-ops?
The story that David told me, and I've been trying to get it verified, and I have talked to one of the persons on his staff to try to get him on the program, that Harry Belafonte was denied renting a unit in New York. Mm-hmm. So he sent his agent in, who got the application. Belafonte filled it out. The agent took it back, and he was approved. The agent was approved with Harry Belafonte's name. And before they knew anything about it, Harry Belafonte had moved into the building. The building was later up for sale. Harry Belafonte bought it mm-hmm. and made it into a co-op.
Wow.
That's what the story is.
That
now,
is
if that's true or not.
Story.
Okay, yeah. And I would love to have him on the show to tell the story.
Absolutely.
And it's like, I was also, who was one of the first persons, there was some artists who were also in that co-op, who bought into that co-op. Mm-hmm. So it is an absolutely fantastic story.
And didn't you also tell a story about Thurgood Marshall having to rent a co-op, or he was able to rent a co-op when he was denied housing, too? Well, so it was the co-op that saved him.
He had married a Filipino lady. Mm-hmm. It's my understanding of this history. Mm-hmm. And he couldn't get into housing, so he went into a co-op. But he also understood, I think, he also had worked in a co-op, I think delivering groceries early on, because struggling lawyers didn't make any money either. Mm-hmm. So that's how he augmented his money, was by working in a co-op. So he lived in a co-op, worked in a co-op, and very much involved in co-ops and this whole collective, all the way through the civil rights movement of people living at Penn South. Mm-hmm. Penn South Cooperative seemed to have been the headquarters for the civil rights movement, where they had meetings and stuff, and even the March on Washington. All of that sort of, it seemed like, from as I have been told the history, that people would meet at Penn South to plan for the March on Washington.
Interesting.
So this whole co-op world, the Highlander School. The Highlander School in Tennessee is where Rosa Parks and a lot of people went to study about what it meant to be, what are your civil rights? What are your rights as an American citizen? Mm-hmm. Okay. And so as they studied civil rights, then they were able to then stand up, for rights, or sit down for rights, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. But they knew their rights. And so this Highlander School, and I have threatened to go there. I think they have moved, but either South Carolina or North Carolina. But there's just a tremendous history. And as I was telling my granddaughter, you got to do your own study. You just can't take what somebody else writes as history,
right? Okay,
and decide that that's the facts, and you got all the facts. She was beside herself. She said, "Well, if they call it history, why don't they tell us all of it?" I said,
I love it. It's so good that she got that lesson
early.
So now she can look and find the real story or the whole story.
And this program is brought to you by the National Cooperative Bank because they're wanting you to have the information that you need so that you can either look for a co-op if you want a housing co-op, or if you want to look for grocery co-ops, if you want to look to see how you can help some people that have come together to form a business, that you can go look for these different co-ops, become a part of them. Or if there's a group of you that want to get together and form your own housing co-op, as Ajowa and her friends did with the Ella Jo Baker Intentional Community. They formed this community and they have their own co-op, and they define who is going to be in it and how it's going to work when their bylaws, that you can get the skills and the tools that you need, the information that you need. As WOL says, information is power, and that information is power only when you use it. So if you get information, like I was trying to tell my granddaughter, you get the history, you get the information, how you start a co-op, how you can get into a co-op, how you can work together to form a business, then you can have power. We've got to take a break to go to news and the weather. As this life journey that you have done, is there any kind of one message you want to make sure people get today?
Yes, that we need to change our thinking. We, as you mentioned, we don't get the full story, so we don't really know our power. We are so individualistic, but the nature is cooperative. We cooperate in sports and other things, and we need to learn to cooperate in all aspects of our lives. And so that's an issue with us, so we need to really learn how to do that.
Well, that cooperation is what this program is all about, and I'm finding that it's a lady, the first week that we talked, the first week that we had this program a year and a half ago, said that I asked her, why aren't there more co-ops? And she said it's hard work. It's hard work working together, particularly since our mindset is for individualism. Yes. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Information is power, and Ajowa Ifateyo is our guest today, and she's giving us information on this Women's History Month. I'm still talking about Black History Month from last month. Mm-hmm. We have her on to talk about cooperatives, and when we left before the break, we were talking about how collectivism, how we have to change our mindset. That change of mindset is not easy to do. In my day job, I am a property manager, and I got involved with co-ops, with housing co-ops, and managing them. And what I noticed was that a housing co-op, affordable housing co-op, they work much better than affordable housing apartment buildings. But the big thing that has to change is the tenants would have to change their tenant mentality into a homeowner mentality. And once that change happened, then the co-ops worked much, much better in every aspect that you can think of, from the way it was run to day-to-day running of the co-op to less crime. Anything that you can think of, all of the measures said that housing co-ops function much better than. And that's what we want to talk about, getting people to change from individualism, the John Waynes, the Lone Ranger. If you look at any of those movies with John Wayne in them, there was a whole bunch of people. If he was the captain of some command, there was all of these people under him. But we mentioned the individualism, and that's what I grew up understanding, and not we working together.
Right.
And so that's what you said you wanted people to talk about. Well, how did you come to this idea, since you grew up in America too, in South Florida, did you say?
South Florida. And see, the South is so much different than here, even though people think this is the North, it's still Southern. But we looked after each other. We spoke to each other. My grandmother used to save clothes and dishes and help new families get started in Hollandale, the city that I'm from. And so the whole way I grew up was looking out for other people. And so it's not really new. And so, you know, you understand, and being an activist, you understand that somebody has to do something to change the world. And so I was involved in that. Doing a lot of activist work. And so co-ops was just another extension. It was a way to economically organize, to make a difference in Black people's lives, their economic situation. So that's what attracted me to it. And interestingly, when I was at the first conference at the University of Maryland that NCBA, the National Cooperative Business Association, and the University of Maryland's Democracy Collaborative helped to organize. And then the next year, in 2003, they had a meeting in, I believe it was Amherst, Mass. And at that meeting, I was just going to the meeting because I was so excited about co-ops. But at that meeting, I got chosen. I was voted on the board. And I was like, I don't really understand co-ops that well. But they had the consciousness then to understand that they needed women and people of color involved in cooperatives. And so I fit the bill, and they voted me in. There was a little, some people didn't like it. There was a guy who actually really wanted to be on the board, white guy, in a solar co-op, and he didn't make it, and so he was a little disgruntled. And people were telling me, don't worry about it because we voted you in. Mm-hmm. And that's been a great experience. I mean, from there, I became a member of the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, which started the first conference in Minneapolis in 2004 to organize worker co-ops around the country. So I was on that board for like 7 years. I was on the Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy for like 9 years. And did a lot, worked with a group called Democracy at Work, Collaborative, and trained in co-op development. I did work with Ujamaa Collective, a group of women in Pittsburgh who have an African-American boutique and do some other cooperative work. And I got involved with Grassroots Economic Organizing. Since I was a journalist, I worked with the Miami Herald and Los Angeles Times and the Allentown Morning Call. I was drawn to writing, and so at GEO, I did writing about cooperatives and other activities of Black people, economic alternative activities. And so it's just been a labor of love. At that conference, I heard...
Which conference?
The conference at University of Maryland, where the first Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy, first cooperative conference on this side of the country took
2002?
2002. Gar Aparovich spoke. And at that point, he said that we had to build the foundation. The work that we were doing was very important, and we had to build the foundation for the next generation. And so that really stuck with me. And he said it's a lifetime commitment. And so I took that to heart. And so I started learning all I could about co-ops. I was one of the only Black people involved. In fact, Jessica Gordon-Nimhart and I were the two Black people in that whole movement. And it was so ironic because, when we would talk to Black people about it, they just thought this was a foreign idea. And so we talked about her book. She was writing her book then. And I used to tell her, boy, this book is going to be so needed because it's going to talk about all this history, and we could change people's minds about, the origins of co-ops. Black people were right there in the beginning and did a lot of great work in this country about co-ops. And so, and then I lived in Ella Jo Baker Intentional Community. And that was another experience that was really exciting.
Well, I want to go back to that, your housing. But the Grassroots Economic Organizing, GEO is what you call it. Mm-hmm. What does that organization do? And do you write for their newsletter?
Yes, I'm a co-editor. We run it as a collective. It's a volunteer organization. We don't get paid. We come together. We write articles. We scan the world for news that relates to cooperatives and other economic alternatives, such as bartering, timeshare, where you do some work for someone and then they do work for you. You don't necessarily have to exchange money. And some of them do have money, like Anacostia dollars. And in Baltimore, they have some alternative currency. So there are, different things that people are doing that help people to survive without money necessarily, but getting people together to provide services. And so we organize a conference. We're organizing a conference in July in Worcester, Mass, on regional cooperative economic solidarity organizing. And so that's one of the things we do. We make it possible for people to understand what's going on in the cooperative world.
I know, I just wish you could come with smaller names. Regional cooperative solidarity organizing.
And so solidarity organizing is just the thing that we used to do. We kept each other's children when somebody had to work, or fed the children, or, got together and build houses. My uncles used to build houses. So all the neighbors would get together and help build the house. These are the things that we did to survive in this country. And so those are the kinds of things that people now calling solidarity economy, bartering, working for just, volunteer to help somebody, to have loans that has low interest or no interest, but doing things to help people in this economy.
Solidarity. I had taken away that meant solid. We're solid together.
Well, that's another way of looking at it. Okay. We're definitely solid together. It takes people
working together, economy where we're working together to support each other.
Right.
And that is what I consider cooperatives are.
Yes.
People coming together, working together. And what drew me to this cooperative, for really liking this model versus the capitalistic model, was that when you talked earlier about everyday people, in these affordable housing communities, it's everyday people. Sometimes people did not, at best, had a high school education.
Right.
And when they made decisions on what's best for the group, what's best for the community, not necessarily what's best for one individual or the other. Right. And I also noticed that if there was an organization, a cooperative housing organization, where people were making decisions for an individual, like if there was somebody on the board that they may decide to give their mom, who lived in a co-op, a new refrigerator or a new carpet. Once that started happening, then you would find that the co-op would start going down.
Right, it's demoralizing.
Demoralizing. Once there was no integrity, then that would be the cause of why co-ops would go down. And what I've also found out, that when you look at the HUD-sponsored co-ops and the HUD-sponsored apartment buildings, that, again, the numbers for the HUD-sponsored co-ops were much better, a lot less defaults, delinquents, a lot less people paid. Also, rent was cheaper because it did not have the capital, the need for profit, and people took better care of their units.
Right, because it's theirs.
It's theirs. Right. Everything sort of worked. So this whole solidarity or cooperation, all of this sort of works when people, and it's amazing, like you said, in the South. I grew up in Bluefield, West Virginia, and it was the same thing. that people just helped each other. In the community, and that community I grew up was black and whites. Mm-hmm. It was not just a black community, and it was the same thing. I didn't even know anything about racism until we went to school. Wow. Okay, because the blacks went to the black school and the whites went to the white school, and then the whites started acting funny, mm-hmm. where they didn't before. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. We have to take a break for news and the weather and traffic. I'm having a wonderful conversation, hoping you're getting some information that would cause you to have power, to have control over your life. And we'll be right back to continue this conversation.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to Everything Cooperative. Ajowa Ifateyo is our guest this morning, talking about collectivism, solidarity, working together. I was at the Greenbelt Housing Co-op. It's a 1,600-unit housing co-op here in Greenbelt, Maryland. And there was a plaque on the wall that said that cooperatives gives people the tools to control their own destiny. And I like that. That stuck out at me, Ajowa. It's sort of, and I started asking the question, what are the tools? And it takes me to the fifth principle of the modern cooperative, and that is information, training, education. Those are the tools that you get when you join a cooperative. And Ajowa has already talked about her path in getting elected to a board and learning, and then just trying to get as much information as she could about cooperatives and working together. And what she's come up with is that we can control our lives. We can control our destinies if we work together, which is part of her experience growing up in Florida and watching her grandmother save for new families. Part of my experience growing up in Bluefield, West Virginia, where there was community. And I've talked about this, Ajowa, that if I did something out in the street and a neighbor caught me, at least if I didn't get a spanking, I would at least be told, and they would call my mom. And back then there were not telephones. Right. So she would holler, Flory Ellen, Vernon's done X, Y, Z. And I would get it when I got home, and I get it in the street. So there was always there's a community raising children. It takes a village to raise a child. Cooperating. Yeah, cooperative, working together. The Underground Railroad was a cooperative. Absolutely. People pulling together their resources for a common good. And there was another guy on the program, Papa Sin from Senegal, and he said that co-ops are developed to solve some community problem. Right. If there's no community problem, there's no need for a cooperative. Right. And so this community problem of slavery, so people band together in a cooperative called the Underground Railroad, and they help people to move out of slavery to the north or to Canada or to somewhere, maybe even to an Indian reservation. But they got out of slavery, and there's people working together. So this is what cooperatives do, and if you really have something that you're trying to do. I've had a couple of people call in. Oh, by the way, if you want to call in, if you have a question of myself or Ajowa, you can call in at 1-800-450-7876. And we've had people to call in at 1-800-450-7876, and they're starting their business, and it's 2 or 3 people or 3 or 4 or 5 people getting together and using each other's skills to help run a business. And what Jessica Gordon-Nimhard found was that there's less failures. Right. Because people are working together and they bring more skill sets. Right. So there's less failures in co-ops, whether it's housing or worker co-op. Right. You have that sense of ownership. This is mine. I'm working to build this. I'm not making somebody else rich. I'm making myself rich, or I'm able to survive. So that's the key difference. And I've had some people in the cooperative world really, they frown upon this whole thing of profit or rich, because the other motives of concern for community, which is the 7th principle, is a bigger sort of reason for being cooperative. But there's also, you need to make a profit in order to survive or grow. Absolutely. So I think profit is fine. That profit doesn't have to be insane profits where you're multi-billionaires or something. But it can't. You have to make enough money to pay your expenses and to grow the business and perhaps give dividends. And a living wage. A living wage. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so that people can survive out here. There was a co-op, a construction cooperative in Boston.
their work, they were paying pretty good. This was like in 2003, $70,000. But it was really hard for their workers to afford housing in Boston. So they were considering trying to build housing for their workers. So, you got to pay so that people can survive in whatever area that they're living. And you got to make money to do that, make a profit to do that.
So I'm all for the profit motive. And I think it was just last week, telling I like to make money. And a gentleman was saying that too often greed gets in the way to cause people to make poor decisions.
Right.
But I think if your motive lines itself with what's best for the community,
right,
then making money is good.
Right.
It's when your motive is, I just need more, I need more, I need more, I need
right,
more.
Because I want to buy my 10th car or, second house.
10th plane.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And as long as people, the other thing about cooperatives is that people come together and make the decision. It's not just one person at the top making all the decisions for everybody. People who are involved are making these decisions, and they're based on what they're doing. They know their job, and so they can contribute to it. And so you have less chance of failure because everybody is putting their position out there. Now, it takes work because, you have differences of opinions. And, education is key here so that people really understand the mission and why we're doing stuff. We're going to make money, but we're not, trying to make a whole lot of money to exploit people.
Well, Oaks Management is a company I started 22 years ago or so, and a property management company. Mm-hmm. And so for 22 years, I've been making the decisions. Mm-hmm. All right. Now we're going through this process of making it a worker co-op. So we're in this conversion process. And what I found very interesting is that the people that the employees are so used to me making the decisions.
Yes.
It's extremely hard for them to get into the conversation.
A lot of us
are
afraid of that kind of power.
Well, and the responsibility.
And responsibility, yeah.
Do I make the right decision? What happens? And it's also hard for me because I'm wanting to say, oh, do this. This is how we got to do it.
You have to get out of that habit.
I've been doing it for 30 years.
Right.
Okay,
right.
Even before this in different organizations where I've been a manager or leader or something. And so it does take this, you talked about it earlier, this change, this attitudinal change, both from the individual to collective or cooperative decision-making. Mm-hmm. And it just won't happen. And a gentleman from Don, I found through the U.S. Workers, you mentioned the name earlier.
The U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives.
Yes, U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives is helping us.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And he said it would take 6 months to a year, and I'm going, he said it could take longer. And originally I'm thinking, oh, we can do this in 6 months or 3. And I've just found out, no, because it's attitudinal change.
Right, and it's ingrained. Talking about Women's History Month. Women, we're taught to be subservient to men or to believe men are smarter than us. And as black
we are,
people,
aren't we?
No, you're not. I'll just let you guys think that. But the same thing happens with black people and white people. We're taught that they're superior and we're inferior. And so sometimes we have to coax people into coming out of their shell and understanding that they have information, they have power, they have knowledge that they can use and that they've been doing all their lives. We've been running families, all of us. That's why I say co-ops is not that different from growing up in a family. You have to respect other people's needs and wishes in a family. And so it's the same thing with co-ops. You let people talk, see who's the best. Somebody might be the best at paying the bills. Somebody may be the best cook. Somebody may do the lawn well. And so you let whoever does the job best do that job and respect their opinions when they say, no, I've been doing it like this for 10 years and it's better to do it this way.
You just hit upon a lot of stereotypes and biases. You got the gender, male versus female. You have race, black versus white. You got so many different biases, old versus young.
Yes.
And so, blonde, blue eyes versus all the rest. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so you got so many biases that sort of, when you come together, and you say, we want to work cooperatively. We want everybody to have the same voice so that everybody can be heard, and then we take a vote. Right. And whatever the majority decide, then that's the way we're going to go.
Well, sometimes you want to let the minority or those who are opposing have a say-so. Sometimes you may compromise. Say, okay, what is the worst thing that you're concerned about? And so you work around that, and so that you don't have that minority later sabotaging the rule of the majority. So you want to hear what they're saying and address their concerns so that, later on they won't feel like they have to do something that's going to destroy their organization.
That's fascinating that you'd bring that up, because it's like, again, what is best for the community?
Right. And we don't always do that. We know what's best for the whole, but sometimes our selfishness takes over. Like you say, I want to give my mother a unit or
carpet or refrigerator or whatever it is.
And that's not the best thing for the community. It's going to destroy morale, which would eventually destroy the
organization.
And so you want to have principles and transparency so that everybody knows what's supposed to happen, and when it doesn't happen, everybody has a right to bring this to the table without being ostracized in any way. So that takes work, because we've been taught all our lives to look out for ourselves only. Teachers tell us, "I got mine, you better get yours." Is there nothing wrong with being an individual in the sense of you want to shine and be creative and be yourself, but learning to work with somebody else, like you had to do in your family. You didn't go to college by yourself. Your parents or a student loan or a scholarship or something got you there. And so you have to learn to work with people, no matter how brilliant, creative you are. And so those things and then our internalized oppression. We have to learn to get out of that.
Oppression?
Oppression. I like to say internalized racism. We accept and adopt the way that the racist society looks at us. And so we may think, because I didn't go to college, I can't run a business. Or because I'm black, I'm not going to be good in business. Or I can't write because I'm black. Or even a man, because I'm a man, I can't raise children, or I can't, do certain things. We all have these perceptions that we've internalized, or not just perceptions, these are what society teaches us. And so we adopt them, And so even though you may be a woman and you might be a better speaker than a man, you sit back because that's what men are supposed to do. I've been in many cars with men lost. I remember my uncle had us riding around New York for 6 hours. He was lost, but he would not stop and get directions. I never forgot that. I was a kid. It's like, I'm never going to let a man do that to me again. But, he as a man, he felt like he couldn't ask for help. So we have all these things that we've learned that we have to unlearn, and that's what takes the time in a co-op. And that's hard work. And I always say co-ops are not for everybody, because some people never want to do that. They don't want anybody questioning them. They don't want to be transparent.
And they don't want to hold that. That's a lot of responsibility, and you have to be held accountable.
Yes.
And so a lot of people are not used to be held accountable. They don't want to be held accountable. They cannot stand to be held accountable, and so they don't want that responsibility. So co-ops are not for everybody. I totally agree.
They're not. I always say it's for the hungry people. Those people out here who can't find affordable housing will get together with, 3 or 6 of your friends or neighbors and family. You got to be careful with that, too, because you don't always get along with family. And put your money together and buy a building.
That's the community. There's a community need. Yeah. You call it hungry. If there's a need.
Yeah, there's a need.
Then, or if you're hungry, in whatever sense of hunger there might be that need creates, then get together as a group and create your co-op. I want to come back. You said earlier that it was a co-op that you were into that did not work because there wasn't enough money.
Yes.
Because it wasn't Elijah Baker Cooperative as some others. I want to talk a little bit about that and it's capital versus cooperative. And we're going to take another break. We'll be right back. If you have any questions or comments, call 1-800-450-7876. Don't touch that dial.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
Information is power. That's why NCB is sponsoring this program to give you information about cooperatives so that you have the power to control your own destiny. NCB's mission is to help cooperatives grow by supporting and being an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, placing special emphasis on serving the needs of communities that are economically challenged. And that's most of African American communities, Latin brown folks communities. You get a lot of people in the minorities that live in economically challenged communities, and National Co-op Bank was created by Congress to bring financial services to the people in these low-income communities. And Ajowa, you said earlier that you were helping to form a co-op that did not make it because of capital. They didn't have capital. What kind of co-op was that you were trying to form?
When I was at the conference at University of Maryland on co-ops.
2002.
2002.
Okay.
There was a group called Collective Copies, and they were a copy shop. And I was really struck by that idea because it looked like an easy business to get into, just setting up a copy shop. And so there was a guy at the corner of Georgia and Harvard. I can't remember his name, but he had a shop there, and he was selling that shop. And so 3 other friends and I got together, and we were going to get that shop and start like a franchise of Collective Copies. Well, as it turned out, we couldn't get the money to actually buy it outright. I think we did try NCB, but I think they wanted us to take out more money, and we didn't want to take out a whole lot of money, and we needed somebody to like quit their job and work in the store, but there was really no guarantee that we would be able to, make enough money in that first year. So when you start a co-op, you do need money and a line of credit, because the business is not going to get off the ground for a year, generally. You give yourself, a year, and then it may not even get in the red for another 2 years. So, generally it's 3 years before.
May not get out of the red, may still have a negative. Okay.
Right.
Generally
it takes 3 years to start making some money. And so, besides your bills, you're covering your costs, but, making money.
So you went to National Cooperative Bank for a loan to buy this business, and they wanted you to take out more money than you were asking for?
Well, I believe their minimum was like $150,000 or something, and we didn't want to take out that much money. And I think we only had 2 people who had like really good credit.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we were being conservative there, but I do believe there's a limit. Now, if you have a large co-op or something where you have good credit and some money, you need some money to actually borrow money. I think they would be okay with something like that. And I know they help a lot of food stores. So, and I'm sure, and that was a long time ago. That was like 2002. I'm not sure what they're doing now. It might be a whole different process.
Well, what I have found is that what you're talking about in the capital needs, and this is why there is this capitalism and cooperative, and they're almost like at opposite ends, because the capitalists, they want to make money off of their capital, and the cooperative are more interested in the employees, the product, the community, and environment. So you have different needs, but to me, they have to learn how to work together, because you do need capital, as you said. And NCB is in a very interesting quandary, because most banks are interested in 2 things. They're really 3. They're interested in getting their money back.
Right.
They're interested in getting interest on their money, and they're interested in getting their money back.
Right.
So that's why sometimes when I first started looking at buying a business, it is you'd only go to a bank to borrow money if you didn't need their money, because you already had money. Right. You needed money, like you said, and you need good credit. There are certain things you have to have in order for a bank to loan you money. But NCB was designed to loan money in low-income communities. And in low-income communities, most people don't have money. They don't have capital. Our whole system of helping low-income people is not to help them create assets. Right. It's to help them survive. Welfare does not help you get assets. Right. Food stamps don't help you to get assets. If you get an apartment in a low-income apartment building, there's no way for you to build assets. Right. Okay, but in the co-op world, if you're in an affordable housing co-op, you can build wealth. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's not a lot of wealth. Right. Okay, but you end up getting interest off your money, and there's a lot of different ways of creating wealth in a low-income cooperative housing co-op, and also in other co-ops. So NCB has to be able to loan money to people that don't have a lot of capital and may not have very good credit.
Yeah, but they want their money back too.
Absolutely. You can't survive unless you get your money back.
Exactly.
You can't survive unless you get interest. You got to make money. We talked about that earlier.
Right.
But there's a juggling piece for them because that's their mission.
Right.
So they're trying to find a way.
Right.
Okay. And so there's cooperative.
And they're more open to helping low-income people or people with bad credit to find a way to get the money.
That's right.
And to be able to pay it back. Like they might help with training and
technical assistance, all kinds of technical assistance.
Whereas another bank is not going to, first of all, give you the money, period. And then if you're a co-op business, they don't understand that model. So they're not too willing to lend to you.
Right.
They don't understand who's going to pay the money back. You got 10 people. Which one of you guys going to pay the money back?
And the training is so critical. And it may be like 1 year, 2 year, 3, 5 years for people getting training.
Actually, it should be ongoing.
Yes.
Because issues come up all the time.
Absolutely. I have a 16-unit senior housing cooperative. Mm-hmm. Housing counseling services trained them for a year. Okay, after they got started, Mana, which is a developer of low-income housing here, developed it. And housing counseling services came in and did a training. And then at least once or twice a year, they would come back. Now, they've been in existence for about 12 years. Every now and then we'll talk about the new people getting training because new people come in.
Absolutely.
And seniors, unfortunately, die or they move to living where they need more help. And so we've had, I guess it's a 16-unit property. I would say 8 people have moved out in the 12, 13 years that it's been in existence for one reason or another. And so this training is ongoing. As a matter of fact, Papa Sin, who I talked to you about earlier, said training should happen at every meeting.
Yeah, that's how we did it in the Elijah Baker.
Yeah, every meeting.
Just a minimum of 15 minutes.
Right.
I mean, sometimes longer, but every meeting.
And there's a piece I've learned about the grocery co-ops is that the people that become members or on the board of a grocery cooperative, if you're going to come on the board, you have to have a financial literacy test and pass it. So you have to be trained because one of the things about being on a co-op is they talk about making informed decisions. So when you vote is with data, with information.
Right.
So you have to learn how to digest that information and the financial numbers, the profit and loss statement, the balance sheet. I remember when I was first asked to do a budget, I was scared to death. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I was running the African American Studies Department at San Diego State University at 23, 24 years old.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah. And I was teaching math in the African American. That's a whole nother subject. Mm-hmm. And I was asked to do a budget and scared. Now it's like brushing your teeth, a budget.
I mean, you balance your household. It's the same thing.
Oh, yeah, but I didn't know what a budget was. And it just
right. And that's how a lot of people in co-ops are. But if you tell them, look, you run your checkbook, run your household,
once you get trained,
you can run a business.
I tell another grandson is that he tells me his work is hard at school. And I said, well, it's always hard until you know. Once you learn it, it somehow becomes easy.
That's true. That's
it becomes
very
easy.
good.
So this is why the training is so important. And this is one of the things that NCB does is try to get the technical support, the training that is needed to run a business. I would have loved to seen that if you all could have bought that business on the corner of Georgia Avenue and Harvard. That's right at Howard?
No. Down from Howard. Close. It was very
close to Howard.
Right. It would have been perfect. A coffee shop, mail center, office supply place, I forget the name. It was a black man who owned it. And, we just couldn't get the money to do that.
And it does some businesses the first year they can make a profit or break even. It would be great if you could have broken even where people would have been paid their salary, if somebody would have had to left their job. But the other part of a business is that there is no guarantee and it's a risk.
Yeah.
Every business is a risk.
Right.
And that's why most businesses fail in the first 5 years. My business has not strived at all. One of the reasons is because I make too many decisions from the heart and not from the pocketbook.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you have to have that balance.
You have to have the balance. But it has survived for 22 years, and so I feel very, very good about that because most businesses fail in 5 years.
Right.
Okay. But a co-op businesses, they last longer because the people are working together. So it would have been great if you all could have made that business work. And if anybody out there would like to start their own business, then you can go to ncba.coop. That's National Cooperative Business Association.coop, and they can help with this education and figuring out money. They have a group that they're associated with Cooperative Development Fund or Cooperative Development Foundation, I don't know, CDF.coop. And they help with these loans, but they're smaller loans that help you to get the education and knowledge you need to help start a business. So there are monies out there and people out there that help you to get started in your business. You know, we have a minute or two left. You have any last words that you want to tell people for this program?
Yes, I think it's important for us to understand that what we're doing is a spiritual process. You know, spirituality is caring for our fellow people. And so you're not only helping yourself, but you're helping the world. You are doing God's work, so to speak, in helping, you know, co-ops can fulfill needs where there are no services. Like if you don't have child care, that's something you can do.
Okay, everybody. It's not only helping self, but you can also reach out and help the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you have any contact information?
Yes. Go to geo.coop and check out our articles, or you can email me at ifateyo@gmail.com, IFATEYO@gmail.com.
Thank you, Ifateyo. It's a pleasure. We'll see you next Thursday.
1450 WOL.